counting down 12 hideout guns the Old West really carried in vest pockets, boot tops, coat cuffs, and under saloon bars. And stay with me, because one of these guns killed a president of the United States. It cost $10, and the killer picked it for how it would look in a museum. That one is coming at number 3. Number 12, the Allen and Thurber Pepperbox. Before Colt conquered the market, this was America's pocket gun. Patented by Ethan Allen in 1837, it packed 5 or 6 rotating barrels, usually around .31 caliber, and it cost roughly half the price of a Colt. That's why thousands of 49ers carried one to the gold fields in a coat pocket. One long pull of the trigger turned the barrels, raised the hammer, and fired. Fast for its day. There was just one problem. That flat bar hammer sat directly in your line of sight. Aiming was an act of faith. Mark Twain made it immortal. He wrote about a companion whose Allen went after a playing card nailed to a tree and hit a mule standing 30 yards to the left of it. If she didn't get what she went after, a stage driver said, she would fetch something else. Sometimes all 6 barrels went off at once, and still men trusted their lives to it because it was cheap and it was always there. Number 11, the Smith & Wesson Model 1. In 1857, this dainty little 7-shooter changed everything. It was the first commercially successful revolver to fire a self-contained metallic cartridge. No powder flask, no percussion caps, just 7.22 rimfire rounds, a tip-up barrel, and a size that vanished into a vest pocket. It cost $12.75, and Smith & Wesson paid the patent holder, Rollin White, a quarter for every gun they built. During the Civil War, soldiers on both sides bought them out of their own pockets as a last-ditch hideout gun. By 1863, the factory was running a 1-year backlog, and Mark Twain, yes, him again, carried one west. His review, it carried a ball like a homeopathic pill, and it took the whole 7 to make a dose for an adult. It only had one fault, he said. You could not hit anything with it. The Frontier bought $250,000 anyway. The gun you have beats the Colt you left at home. Number 10, the Colt 1849 Pocket. Here's a fact that surprises people. The best-selling Colt of the entire percussion era wasn't a big iron on somebody's hip. It was this, a .31 caliber pocket revolver, typically 5 shots, with a barrel as short as 3 inches. Nearly 340,000 were made. That's more than the Walker, the Dragoon, and the Navy. It rode in carpet bags, cash drawers, and coat pockets from California to Kansas. And it obeyed the oldest law of the frontier, supply and demand. In the gold rush camps, a revolver worth $25 back east could sell for 10 times that in the diggings. One more thing, collectors, you knew this was coming. The famous Wells Fargo model, the short one with no loading lever. Wells Fargo's own records show the company never bought a single .31 caliber revolver. The name was invented by collectors a century later. The gun is real. The story is a sales pitch. Number 9, the Colt Cloverleaf. In 1871, Colt built a revolver for indoor problems and called it, officially, the House Pistol. 4 rounds of .41 rimfire in a cylinder shaped like a 4-leaf clover. Slim, snag-free, made to lie flat in a coat pocket or a cardroom drawer. Only about 10,000 were ever made. Its reputation says gambler's gun. But here's the twist. Its one famous documented kill happened about as far from a saloon as you can get. New York City, January 1872. A businessman named Edward Stokes shot the Wall Street tycoon Jim Fisk on a hotel staircase over a woman. 3 trials, a manslaughter verdict, and to this day collectors call it the Jim Fisk pistol. The West's little house gun made its name back east, which tells you something. By the 1870s, everybody was carrying quiet, and that was the deal in the cattle towns too. Ride into Dodge or Wichita, and the law said your gun was supposed to go into deposit. Check like a coat at the livery or the sheriff's office, picked up on your way out of town. That was the theory. This list is what actually happened. Number 8. The $2 revolvers collectors now call suicide specials. When the big cartridge patent expired in 1869, every machine shop in New England started stamping out cheap, nickel-plated spur-trigger revolvers. An 1884 St. Louis wholesale ad lists them from $1.60. They sold under names that belong on dime novels: the Tramp's Terror, the Red Jacket, the Bulldozer, the Defender, the Bang Up. Hardware stores and mail-order catalogs moved them by the crate, and they ended up in aprons, cash boxes, and coat pockets across the frontier. They were also junk. No safety notch. The hammer rested directly on a live cartridge. Drop one on a saloon floor, and it might shoot whoever was standing closest. That's the gallows humor behind the name, which, for the record, no cowboy ever used. Suicide Special was coined by a gun collector in 1948. In 1885, they just called it the cheapest gun in the store. And for a workman earning $30 a month, sometimes that was the whole decision. Number 7, the ladies' guns. In Europe, gunsmiths built tiny muff pistols for a woman's winter hand warmer. Out west, women skipped the accessories and went straight to the derringer. When the journalist Henry Stanley, the Dr. Livingstone, I presume, man, passed through Julesburg, Colorado in 1867, he wrote that the women there carried fancy derringers slung to their waists and were, in his words, dangerously expert with them. The saloon and dance hall districts ran on that arithmetic. In 1893, a Creed, Colorado newspaper mentions, completely matter-of-factly, a woman known as Timberline and her .41 caliber pistol. Poker Alice Ivers, the most famous gambler and address the West ever produced, was known her whole life for the .38 she kept within reach. The garter holsters Hollywood loves, mostly invented later. The truth is plainer and harder. Women worked the roughest rooms on the frontier, and they went armed like everyone else, just quieter. Number 6, the strangest gun on this list, the Protector Palm Pistol. Patented by a Frenchman named Jacques Tourbiot and made in America starting in 1891, a steel disc the size of a pocket watch holding 7 rounds of .32 extra short in a rotating turret. You didn't grip this gun. You made a fist around it, let the stubby barrel poke out between your fingers, and squeezed. A gun you could hold in a handshake. The Chicago Firearms Company bet everything on it. They ordered 15,000 to sell at the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago. Their contractor delivered barely 1,500 in time, the lawyers ate the rest of the decade, and the company died. By then, the frontier was officially closed, and the Protector became a hideout gun for the New West: card rooms, streetcars, dark streets. The era of the holster was ending. The era of the pocket had already won. Number 5, the Colt Model 1877, the Lightning in .38 caliber, the Thunderer in .41. Colt's first double-action revolver. No cocking, just pull the trigger. With a short barrel option and a bird's head grip, it was built for one job: coming out of a coat pocket in a hurry. $14 new. Gunsmiths called its delicate lockwork the watchmaker's nightmare, and plenty still refused to work on one. The frontier's most dangerous men didn't care. Billy the Kid carried one. Pat Garrett himself described the Kid's revolver as a self-cocker, caliber .41. And John Wesley Hardin, 40 men they say, was carrying a nickel-plated, pearl-gripped .38 Lightning in the Acme Saloon in El Paso in 1895, the night John Selman walked up behind him and ended the argument permanently. The court records list the Lightning still in his pocket. The deadliest man in Texas, and his last gun never cleared the coat. Number 4, the Remington Double Derringer. If the Old West has one true hideout icon, this is it. 2 .41 caliber barrels stacked one over the other, 3 inches long, flat as a pocket watch. Remington built it from 1866 all the way to 1935, roughly 150,000 of them, and in 70 years, never really changed the design. The clever bit lived inside. Each time you cocked the hammer, a little ratchet flipped the firing pin, top barrel, top, bottom. 2 shots, no switches, no thinking. On paper, it was pathetic. The old cartridge books put the 41 rimfire at around 425 feet per second, slow enough that men joked you could watch the bullet leave. But across a card table, ballistics don't matter and geometry does. It cost $8 in the Remington catalog. It lived in vest pockets and boot tops for 2 generations, and Buffalo Bill Cody handed out engraved ivory-gripped ones as gifts. The little gun everyone pretended not to have. Number 3, the British Bulldog and the payoff I promised you. A stubby 5-shot double-action revolver in .44, 2.5-inch barrel, big bore punch, small enough to vanish into a coat. Webley of Birmingham introduced it in 1872, and Belgian factories flooded America with copies, $3.80 in the mail-order catalogs, when a genuine Colt ran about 17. It was everywhere. The Southern Pacific Railroad issued Bulldogs to its employees until 1895, and on July 2, 1881, the same summer Tombstone passed its gun ban, a delusional failed lawyer named Charles Guiteau walked into a Washington railroad station with a Bulldog-type revolver in his pocket and shot President James Garfield in the back. Here's the detail that tells you everything. In the store, Guiteau agonized over the grips. He wanted the ivory ones because he'd already decided the gun would end up in a museum and he wanted it to look good on display. $10, cartridges, and a penknife included. And the museum part came true. The Smithsonian took the revolver and then lost it. To this day, nobody knows where it is. Number 2, the gun Colt never bothered to name. Collectors call it the storekeeper's model. In February 1882, Colt shipped the first single-action armies with the barrel bobbed down to around 4 inches and the ejector rod deleted. Same .45 caliber as the big one. Nothing to snag on cloth. Maybe 1,200 were made in the first generation. Reloading meant poking the empties out with a stick, because this wasn't a gun for a battle. It was a gun for one moment. Fort Worth, Texas, February 8, 1887. The gambler Luke Short, who reportedly carried a bobbed Colt .45 in a leather-lined hip pocket, tailored so it wouldn't print, was called out onto the sidewalk by Jim Courtright, a famous 2-gun man running a protection racket. Courtright said it out loud, "Don't you pull a gun on me," and drew first. It didn't help him. Short fired 5 times at arm's length. One bullet took Courtright's thumb, another his heart. Bat Masterson was standing right there and wrote it up himself. A dandy gambler with a pocket pistol had just beaten a drawn gun. The jury called it self-defense. Number 1, the deadliest hidden gun in the West never sat in anyone's pocket. The cut-down double-barrel shotgun, 10 or 12 gauge, barrel shortened to nothing, loaded with buckshot. Wells Fargo called the men who carried them shotgun messengers, and by Wyatt Earp's own description, each barrel held 21 buckshot. At stagecoach distance, that isn't a gunfight, that's arithmetic. March 1881, the Benson stage out of Tombstone. Robbers stopped the coach and yelled, "Hold!" And messenger Bob Paul yelled back, "I hold for no man," and opened up. 2 men on the coach died. The treasure survived, and that robbery helped light the fuse of the whole Earp Cowboy War. It guarded the towns, too. Ogallala, Nebraska, 1880. A gunman shot bartender Bill Tucker's fingers off at the bar, and Tucker pulled the house shotgun off the back bar with his ruined hand and returned fire anyway. By many accounts, there was one under half the bars in the West. And that phrase, "riding shotgun," nobody ever said it in the Old West. It first shows up in print in 1905 and Hollywood turned it into English. The gun was real. The catchphrase is a movie prop. The guns never left Tombstone. They just went out of sight, into pockets, boots, sleeves, and cash drawers, and stayed there for the rest of the frontier. Hollywood gave the Old West a holster on every hip. The truth was smaller, cheaper, and a lot closer to the vest. Now it's your turn. Guns like these didn't end up in museums. They ended up in attics, in sock drawers, in the family. So if your grandfather left you a derringer, a bulldog, or a $2 revolver with a name like Tramp's Terror stamped on the barrel, tell the story in the comments, make, model, and who carried it. The best one gets pinned. See you on the next trail.